Good morning, everyone. If you are a visitor, welcome to UUSF. And this is a session of forum. This is a co-presentation of our forum committee and the Human Rights Working Group. My name is Jeff Peckrell, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Human Rights Working Group, along with Dolores Perez-Halbron and Melvin Starks, who is somewhere over here. And before we get to introducing our speaker and things like that, I just want to do a few logistics and tell you about a few other things that we have coming up, especially this afternoon. We have a luncheon in this very room right here at 12:30 because the Reiner Awards, which Dolores will be presenting, is a humanitarian award that the church gives annually. Will be given in the service coming up here, and then there's a luncheon to honor the award winner today, and so that's at 12:30. There'll be a lovely lunch right here, and we'd encourage and welcome any of you to come and stay for that. Okay. I want to mention that this session that I'll be introducing in just a minute will be interactive. I think Deborah encourages that, so feel free to ask questions throughout it. We also put cards on the chairs so that you could write questions there. And in a minute, I'll be introducing Robin Larson, who is going to kind of run the Q&A. So the way we normally structure this meeting is I'll also be taking questions on Zoom. There are people joining this meeting on Zoom today and bringing those to the speaker at 10:30, which is when we'll kind of transition from the speaking part of it to the Q&A part of it. And then the meeting ends at pretty much promptly at 10:45, so that those of us who are attending the church service can go over there. It begins at 11. So with all of those logistic things out of the way, I do want to now introduce Robin Larson. Maybe you could just stand, Robin, and we can know who you are. That'll probably be enough. Welcome, Robin. So she has microphone skills and can hand the microphone around to people who want to ask a question or write them down, as we said, and all that. And now I would like to introduce Dolores Perez-Halbron, who will give our Ohlone recognition.
Thank you so much. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, acknowledge that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living here and working here, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. The Greater Bay Area is also the ancestral territory of the Miwok, Yokuts, Patwin, and other Aboriginal tribes. As the original stewards of this land, the indigenous peoples understood the interconnectedness of all things and maintained harmony with nature for millennia. We honor them now for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dolores. And now to introduce our speaker, Deborah Doyle, who has so many credentials, and really, I'll just read a few of them in a minute, but the topic today is book bans, which is something that we're reading about in the news more or less constantly these days. And, you know, this is not just a problem in the South or in Texas. I read an article in the Chronicle a few weeks ago about how the book or the library in San Ramon, the people organized over there, and they've banned books that all of us grew up reading, and it's really quite sad, in my opinion. So this is a very, very important topic, and Deborah will talk to us about it in a minute. Deborah drove down this morning all the way from Sonoma County, where she is the Library Commission President, and among her other accomplishments and past positions, she has served on both the California Public Library Advocates and the California Library Association. She sits on the American Library Association's Committee on Legislation and is currently president-elect of United for Libraries. And I met her on a forum called United to Stop Book Bans. Is that what it's called? I think she'll cover that, because there are ways that you can get involved in this. And this is really a big part of the reason we want to have this topic today, is how people can really get mobilized and get involved in this. Let's see what else. Maybe that's enough. So without further ado, I will introduce our esteemed speaker, Deborah Doyle.
Good Good morning, everybody. How are you? And welcome to everybody on Zoom. I hear there are several of you. We'll try to make this interesting. And I didn't put together a PowerPoint presentation, but if there are things that you'd like afterwards, I can certainly put together some documents and I can put together some action notes and send them to Jeff and get them distributed to you. So book bans, it's enough to make your blood pressure go up at least 25 points, right? We probably should talk about book challenges so that we dial down the rhetoric. It's happening all over, as you know, but let's just get a sense here. How many of you have a library card? Oh my goodness. Well, my work is done. How many of you are from San Francisco? How many of you are from California? How many of you are from elsewhere and have experienced libraries elsewhere? Okay, so you know that they're all different. The press that you have been getting, the book challenges are happening, in fact, all over the country. And so what I thought I could do today is explain a little bit about libraries, explain a little bit about what's going on outside of California, and perhaps make some suggestions of what things you might do. But I would be also delighted to hear your thoughts. Because as Jeff said, I'm working at the local levels, at the national level, at the regional levels, at the state levels, and you all have connections in all of those places, and you need to remember that you do have those kind of connections, because that's going to help us fight the interesting challenges that are going on in the country, because it's also happening in California. As Jeff mentioned, in San Ramon, they're having some issues. In Southern California, they're having some issues, but we don't talk about it much. So do we have any lawyers in the room? No lawyers. Okay. Do we have any librarians? Do we have any lobbyists? Any politicians? All right. And what about book lovers? And let's see, who prefers online books? That's okay. Don't be embarrassed. Kindle is good. Hoopla is good, because you can get that stuff for free at your library. You got kids, you got grandkids. Who's got kids, grandkids in the San Francisco school district? East Bay too. Bay Area. Okay. So the American Library Association did a couple of polls, and the feelings of Americans, the feelings of American voters in particular, are a little different about public libraries and school libraries. And so most people, all parties, most people think that that you shouldn't ban books in public libraries, and books can be challenged certainly, but that you shouldn't ban books. They feel a little differently. They feel a little differently about school libraries, but not that much. Parents believe that they need to be responsible for what their children are reading, but they also don't believe that. Most people don't believe that that after librarians who are trained have put books on the shelves, that then superintendents or politicians should come in and decide that those books don't belong on the shelves, because we have something called the First Amendment, which protects freedom of expression and freedom to read, and the freedom to read has been covered in a lot of legal decisions for many years. Where it gets weird right now is obscenity, the notion of obscenity, but I'm getting ahead of myself. let me tell you a little bit about, I'll just start with libraries. I'll talk a little bit about libraries because there is, as we have seen in the interesting articles about challenges all over the country, there's a lot of money behind this, and they're organized, and they've been thinking about this for a long time, and so the combination of Black Lives Matter, the combination of a generation rolling over, retiring, different people in different walks of life are facing challenges that they never had to face before, and also lots of political pressure means that this is sort of an interesting combination of challenges and opportunities to do things. There are a lot of people who are, my husband, as we were driving down, said, don't talk about politics, but I can't talk about the subject and not talk about politics. So is it okay if I talk about politics? All right. We got the nods. Libraries, there is no national organization of libraries. In California, for example, we have city libraries, we have town libraries, we have county libraries rather. We have one city and county library system in San Francisco. We also have joint powers agreement libraries, and that means that different towns have come together to create a system that then is funded in a particular way. And then they make the rules. The state of California doesn't require towns to create a library, but if they do create a library, then there are rules that they have to follow. There are a lot of over 1,100 libraries in California. That's a lot. Other states are different. Other states are smaller. A lot of states have just rural libraries or a major library in the urban libraries, and then the smaller libraries. And there's usually a state library association, but again, it's a membership organization. So I pay my dues to the California Library Association. My library doesn't necessarily belong to the California Library Association, although it can. And so then there's also at the federal level, there's an American Library Association. The American Library Association does not manage all of those state library associations. They have kind of partnership arrangements. So it is very difficult to mobilize the entire library community when something like this happens. And so, for example, in New Hampshire, I heard this example in a meeting the other day. A young woman, she was a single librarian, and New Hampshire. And her supervisors came in and took books off the shelves. And she says, well, you can't do that. That's against the First Amendment. And they said, we don't care about the First Amendment. So it's not just Louisiana. It's not just Texas. It's not just Florida. And it's certainly not just Missouri. Blood pressure goes up when we hear these things. Yes. But what we do in the American Library Association and then all of its associate organizations, what we can do is we can do polling, we can gather data, we can make sure that people have the information they need to actually have conversations about this, rational conversations about this. We are not, the people who have mobilized and have gone to their school board meetings, to their library board meetings, many of them in the last year or so, because this may be the first time that they have looked at the books that are on the school shelves. So they're not necessarily walking with their kids to the libraries, but they've been exposed to passages in some of these books or something like that. And so they are angry and they're afraid. And angry and afraid people are usually very powerful and very loud, and politicians often pay attention to them. So the American Library Association and what library associations all over the country are trying to do, and libraries, are trying to gather the information that people need to talk to their legislators in a rational fashion, and go to the school board meetings. So the things that, you know, and libraries have always been underfunded, and over the last, I'd say 30 years, and I was with the Friends of the Library here in San Francisco, so I know this library system pretty well. They were incredibly passionate about making sure that people who were underserved before got the material that they needed, got the material that they had never seen before. So they looked for authors who spoke a different language, who were different ages, who were, you know, LGBTQ community is very, you know, so strong here. And the San Francisco Public Library was the first public library to have an LGBTQ center, the Hormel Center, which is still active and functioning, and really, you know, really an amazing space, and an example to many other libraries in the world. But I'm sorry. I was going to make an incredibly important point. It will come to me. It will come to me. Please. They are. In fact, there's a division, and the American Library Association has a bunch of divisions, but there's an academic division. There's a division that includes trustees and civilians and vendors, and I'm president-elect of that division right now. There's a Public Library Association division, and Michael Lambert, who is the library director here in San Francisco, is the president-elect of the Public Library Association division. So I imagine you're going to be hearing a lot of things about that. So in terms of what books are being challenged in academic libraries, the people with the big money I think they're looking at the academic libraries a little differently. They're looking at funding, and they're looking at staffing. They're not challenging the books per se. They're looking at the structure. Sure. Mm-hmm. That's the statement really was about Berkeley and about academic libraries, in that they are finding libraries less important than they used to. And some universities and academic settings are actually trying to do away with libraries, or they're making them all electronic. But I think electronic libraries, and then there is certainly a large push for that. That doesn't mean that the libraries are disappearing. But your point is well taken. So the academic librarians are looking at different things here, but it is affecting all, and it is affecting school libraries mostly. And I think that one of the things, as we step back and we look at it, over the last 50 years, a message among some major funders has been that governments are, the governments are not very sensitive to their voters, that they're overfunded, that they're bloated, that they don't pay attention to what's going on, they don't see what's going on in normal neighborhoods, and then they also are looking at politicians, looking at media. So suddenly the free press is something that people are complaining about. How free is it? How rational is it? And with all of the mergers of newspapers and media and that sort of thing, it's a very interesting, it's an interesting path to find what the real story is. You know, you can't just read one newspaper to find out what the truth is. And some people who have multiple jobs, multiple kids, you know, they forget that. And so it's easy to respond passionately to something if you think that there's, you know, your kid, there's an obscene book on that shelf and it's going to affect him. It's understandable why people would be upset about that and why they would think, well, we're paying these people good money. How can they expose my child to that? However, if you step back, if you look at the data, if you look at what the kids need, if you look at what is actually happening, and then put together some rational information points and go to legislators as a voter, that's when they pay attention. They pay attention to the person who gets to them first often, and the person who is the loudest often. But that is not ultimately what's going to win the race. Yeah.
Is the system, and why do we need to change the system, or is it system, in which way is the system diseased? Don't we need to diagnose the problem first so we can work out, you know, how is the system trying to correct itself, but what is actually the disease and what is the system, before we then go to the state and say, look, this is what we're complaining about?
Well, that's certainly, if there is a disease, of course you have to diagnose it. However, if the disease is mostly politics, if the disease is, we want those vouchers so that we can pay parents to get their kids out of the public school system, so that we don't have to fund the public school system anymore. That's a different thing. A disease is different than messaging that moves an argument forward, I think. And that is certainly what some people are thinking. However, since the First Amendment guarantees that we have freedom of information, if you pay librarians have gone to school for many years to learn how to build collections that in effect annoy everybody. There's something in the collection that is going to annoy you. I can remember in Sonoma, we had a challenge. Someone filled out the right piece of paper, and someone wanted to do away with they wanted us to not subscribe to the NRA's magazine anymore. And so the commission considered it and decided, no, we weren't going to do that, because there are lots of people who have guns in Sonoma County and they probably read this magazine. So it may not move with everybody's politics in Sonoma County, but that's how we did it. And so generally speaking, you know, if there was a challenge, you can fill out a piece of paper. In fact, I brought the San Francisco piece of paper, and you can object, and then they will respond to you. And usually they'll do it pretty quickly, but usually it's the staff. And then if you object again, the commission will take a look at it, or the trustees will take a look at it, and make a decision. This whole socio-political movement is circumventing the regular policies and the regular procedures of the libraries that have been in effect for a very long time. And it's very effective. You know, it's certainly getting the press, it's certainly getting exposure, and it's getting legislative action. So then the issue is, those of us who have enjoyed libraries for our entire lives and appreciate the diversity, we've been quiet. And it's time not to be quiet. Sure.
What is there a threat to the trustees being replaced by maybe very right-wing people? Because that's happening in other parts of the government.
It is happening in other parts of the government, and it certainly is happening on school boards, and it's happening on library boards. And that is part of the, the turnover in generation as well. people who have been on the library trustees, board of trustees for a long time, they've retired or they're not used to angry people coming up to the microphone and appearing at meetings. And so they're done, which then means that the people who are complaining about it on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, you have to do more than that. People have to actually, ask to be appointed, get elected, if that's in fact what is the method. And again, they're all different. Some people in California, some people are elected, some people are appointed. In Sonoma County, we're appointed. In San Francisco, they're appointed, not elected. Yes.
Yeah,
So sorry.
there you go.
Who are the type of people who's trying to circumvent the system which we had for so long and we trusted so much? Are they do you consider they are mostly religiously affiliated?
You know, partly, I think, but partly is people who have been given information that they haven't had before and are surprised by it. If they had come into the libraries before this, if they had been working with their children before this, I think they wouldn't be surprised. I don't want to say that it's only conservatives, because that's not true. It is many people along the political spectrum can be annoyed, but I think it's the people who want to discredit people in authority who are going to spend their money. You know, people who want to spend their money in different ways than, say, roads or libraries or healthcare systems or, you know, whatever. They are. The libraries are an easy target these days. The libraries, especially after COVID and after the Black Lives Matter social unrest, it's a very easy target to say that they are trying to brainwash our children. And so then the answer to that is, that is not true, and this is why. And let us give you the data on this, and let us talk to you about the books that you're reading. For example, the form that you fill out for San Francisco, and one of the questions on the form is, have you read the book? A pretty logical question, yes, but a number of people who have all over the country who have objected to some of these books have not read the books, or they've only read specific chapters, specific references. And you know, they just did a poll, and most of the books that are being objected to either have a main character who is African-American or not white in some way, or an LGBTQ character. And those are the books that are getting most of the attention. So it is also something that is happening at the state levels. And my dad worked for the federal government, and so we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And the first thing that we did when we got to a new town was to find the library, right? And the movie theater, but it was mostly the library. And so I saw different kinds of libraries, but they were always responsive, and they always, you know, they were different. They were always different, but they were safe spaces. And so over the years, over the last, say, I'm gonna say 50 years, librarians have really tried to make sure that as I said earlier, that the underserved are really seeing books that relate to them, right? That have characters that they can relate to, and especially kids, I think. And so what is, I think we've all heard this argument also. you can object to something that you don't want your child to read. Sure. But you can't tell my kid what he can read. And so that, I think, is one of the strongest arguments that we have against the people who just want to yank the books from the shelves and hide them, burn them. I'm not sure. Dave Eggers is an author whom I'm sure all of you recognize, and he lives here in San Francisco. His book was banned in a state that shall remain nameless. And he actually, and they were going to burn it. They didn't even read the book, and they were going to burn his books. And so he went and talked to the teachers and went and talked to the supervisors and that sort of thing, and just wanted to see what this town was all about. And they chose to ban the books, but Mr. Eggers is making those books available. Any of those kids, any kids in that town who want to buy that, who want that book, he's giving it to them with McSweeney's here in San Francisco there. And so those kinds of rays of sunshine make me really believe that we can react to this. And authors are getting involved. It's not just the librarians, and that's another thing about the libraries. You know, they love to think that they're adding to the diversity and the equity and trying to include kids, and that's great. But they are government workers, most of them, right? This is a good thing, but they're government workers. So when they say to a politician, you know, you really shouldn't do this, the politician can immediately say, well, you're a government worker. It's all about your job, right? So people like us who go to the library, who use our library cards, are the ones that can go to the legislators, that can go to the people that we have put into office and say, look, we want all this stuff. We want diverse material for our children. And the school boards, you know, the school librarians in California are, they have been under duress for a number of years. But what a very grim statistic that you all should know is that the ratio of librarians to students in California is 49 in the state. We're 49th in terms of the ratio of school librarian to students in California. Isn't that appalling? It's truly appalling. But in San Francisco, you have one unified school district, right? In Sonoma County, we have 40 school districts. So it's very difficult to have librarians in all of the school districts, right? Which then means that the students are underserved, which then means that who's telling the parents, who's guiding the parents through what's on the shelves? And so librarians are very good at doing the work because they're underpaid, they're overworked, they have lots to do, and they love their community. They love their community. But what they should be doing, and some people who are trustees say this, we should have community conversations. In Roanoke Park, in Gay Pride Week, a lady decided, and she was with that Catholic group that suggested to its members that they go into the library and they take all the LGBTQ books, the kid books that were on display, just take them out with their library card and then never bring them back. So a lady in Roanoke Park did that. She went to the Roanoke Park Library and she took 40 books out. And then she posted on social media that she was never going to bring it back. Well, you can imagine the uproar. There were articles in the paper, there was, and she brought them back even before they were not due. She brought the books back because, you know, has a library card. We didn't take away her library card either. And didn't tell anybody who she was, but that kind of it never dawned on us in Sonoma County that was going to happen up there. And it truly can happen anywhere. So what and we got lots and lots of wonderful support. We got amazing letters from the religious community. Your sister congregation up in Santa Rosa sent us the first letter that was so positive and so supportive. And so what we're hoping to do is have community conversations. The library, churches, schools, other people in the community to talk about this. And that way it dials down the rhetoric. Because I think if the first time you talk about this is in a school board meeting or a library commission meeting, you've lost. What you need to be doing is having the conversations in the community. And I've got a question. Mouse is banned, booked everywhere. What's offensive about this graphic novel? Well, it's about Nazis, and some people don't believe in World War II, right? I'm sorry. Mouse is a banned book everywhere. What is offensive about this graphic novel? How many have read Mouse? Impressive, yes? I would say some people object, some people weirdly don't believe in the Holocaust, don't believe some of the things about World War II that we know about history. So people can object and it can offend people. That doesn't mean that that's true. I'm not sure that that's a good answer, but that's the only answer I have. Is there any indication that banned books are increasing through sales? How are bookstores reacting to banned books? It's a good question, and yes and no. Actually, I just had a conversation with a marketing official from Penguin Random House, and he says that the big books, the sales are going through the roof. The ones that are threatened with banning and threatened with taking off the shelves, but the littler books are not. They're not. Their sales are not rising. So it's sort of a mixed bag. And also part of the interesting problem with banning books in schools is a lot of these kids wouldn't be able to afford going to a bookstore for a book like that. And another question also is the books on the shelves may be one thing, and the books in the databases of the library, school library may be one thing, but these kids have phones. A lot of them have phones. A lot of them have computers. So they can find a lot of the information that the parents who are objecting to these books, they can find it elsewhere.
Another question. Here's one. What is the name of the mother's lobby that is banning books?
Moms for Liberty. That's not the Catholic one, but Moms for Liberty is the one that they started during the Black Lives Matter protests, and then they have now got chapters everywhere, and they have chapters in California. They have chapters in Southern California. They also have chapters in Eastern California.
Okay, here's another question. Do you see similarities with what's happening now in the US regarding book bans and what happened in Nazi Germany in the 30s?
I don't think anybody can not see that. Truly. It's also we're looking back at the 50s as well. If you remember, there was a huge rise in complaints about books during the McCarthy era. And this is different, though. This is different because it is well funded, and it is at an active level, at the local level, it's at the state levels, and it's at the national levels. People love their libraries, and and most of them love school libraries as well. But if the conversations are happening at all of those levels, then that means that truly people who do understand how important libraries are, because we have a very fragile system here, you know. Freedom of expression and the freedom to read is truly, truly essential to our democracy, our republic, if you like, our democratic republic. And it can disappear so quickly, especially if there is work at all of those levels at the same time. I said that my dad worked for the feds, and so but it never dawned on me until I moved out to California that, you know, I learned early that politics were local in San Francisco, that politics was a blood sport, in fact. And then someone who walked me into the library community said to me, okay, look, the library in San Francisco is 95% to 99% funded locally, right? You get a little bit of money from the state and you get a little money from the feds, but the feds won't give, and there's a tiny, tiny federal agency called the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which we always have to go to Congress and ask them to give us a little bit of money, and that's fine. And then that money then filters out, and then the states match that money, right? And then it filters down for projects or whatever the state decides that it's going to. So it usually flows through the state libraries, which are also completely separate from each other. So, you know, there are library things everywhere. But Missouri, for example, just now, Missouri has decided to defund the state library, its state library, because it was objecting to some of the book banning. And the problem with that is then if Missouri defunds that state library, they won't get any federal dollars because the state has to match the federal money. So you have to be making, you know, we have to make sure that all of the politicians up and down the food chain and the aides know how important this is to us, like at a cellular level, how important this is to us, the people that you voted for. I was in Washington, DC last month because it's budget time, and so this is the time. That's also a thing. Don't just talk to your legislators once a year, but if you do have to only talk to them once a year, make sure that it's during the budget time so that they know that they will give you money. But uniformly, the aides, and I saw aides in Speaker Emeritus Pelosi's office, in Senator Feinstein's office, and then a couple of folks elsewhere in California, and uniformly they believe that libraries are the cornerstone of democracy and that they will fight for it. But it is helpful for them to hear from you. It is helpful for them. It was helpful for them for me to walk in the room and say, this is really important to the people in California, and we want to thank you for what you've done so far. So what you have to do truly is talk to them. Tell them what you think. Tell them how important books are. Tell them. Thank them. Write letters to the editors. Do all of those things. Because if we don't do them, and I hate to say the other side, but I'm just getting a sense from this group that you're not really going to go into the school library and yank books off the shelves. But it's incredibly important to make sure that the teachers and it's been a rough few years, lots of retirements, lots of, COVID has not been easy for everybody, is on their last nerve about absolutely everything. And so an occasional thank you, an occasional can I help you? In San Francisco, again, we're so lucky. We're so lucky. So if you, but that doesn't mean that Michael wouldn't like to hear you come down to a commission meeting and say, thanks so much for the work that you're doing and good luck with PLA or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you can't help other people too. That doesn't mean that you can't write a check to the authors in America started a group called Pen America in the 1920s, and they are passionate about this. They're working very, very hard to do to make sure that everybody has toolkits. And honestly, I have a toolkit with me that I was going to put PowerPoints together for, but there's so many toolkits. There's so much information that you can gather. I'm happy to send it. I'm happy to send it to Jeff afterwards. I'm happy to give you some suggestions about what to do. But honestly, there's information everywhere about this. Yeah. Could you, I didn't hear the first part of that. What about the San Francisco Library? Oh, Brooklyn. She told a wonderful story when I just walked in. Brooklyn is actually making e-books of all of the banned books available for every student in America if they touch base with the Brooklyn Library. The Brooklyn, right. So in effect, they've got a database and they're giving everybody library cards, electric libraries, so they can just sign in. So there are pockets of fabulous things that are going on. So what we're trying to do, and it's taken a couple of years. I mean, the American Library Association has been warning people that this stuff is coming for a long time. And so we've been working on it for now. The Freedom to Read has been an official program for about 2 years now. Tomorrow is the beginning of National Library Week. And so we're hoping that we're declaring tomorrow the Freedom to Read Day. And so tomorrow is a great day to give a call to a legislator, to give a call to the library, to give a call to someone that you think can get the word to someone that says, this is how important libraries are. This is what they're doing. I mean, do you know that I want to say 15 years ago, one of the Hewlett-Packard foundations funded the California Library Association, and they wanted to, there are a lot of poor kids who get their meals paid for in school during the school year, right? So how do those kids eat during the summertime? Well, the Hewlett-Packard folks said, let's feed them at the library, right? So lunch at the library was something that they funded. They said, we're only going to fund this for a year. Well, they funded it for 5 because it was such a fabulous program. And now, while it is incredibly sad to me that we have to pay libraries to, that we're paying libraries to feed kids who should have food, but it's a national program now. But in California, we really started that. And so lunch at the library is something that happens. Those kind of programs, not everybody knows about because the library doesn't brag about that stuff. The library just does that stuff. And so if you just pick up a library newsletter, if you get one, that's great. Read it, brag about some stuff. If you don't get a library newsletter, please, please, please get on the news. Get on the mailing list. They do amazing things for all ages. And, if you've got a little bit of money, write a check to Pen America, write a check to the Friends and Foundation of the San Francisco Public Library. They're having an author event next weekend, actually. And like LA, probably the Los Angeles Public Library is inviting lots of important authors to speak on behalf of the Freedom to Read. And I think San Francisco is going to be doing the same. I see questions.
Yes. This is
How many books have been banned? It's the last number that I had was 1261.
12,
Now
1,200.
1,261. Now that doesn't sound like a lot. But it is a lot. And it has the percentage has gone up in the last year. I think 200%, something like that. Let me just get the numbers for you. Do you want that one? I will get that number for you. But it's a staggering percentage, and they're not counting, they're just counting the book. They're not counting how many copies may be missing from all of the libraries and that sort of thing.
Here's another question. Since libraries are mainly locally funded, what's wrong with local context? With local contexts, local control. I'm sorry, it's a little hard to read this in. Even if it's reactionary, what can be wrong with local control?
I don't think people are objecting to local control. I think what they are objecting to is that they're not hearing from everyone. And again, I suggest that if instead of angry people showing up at the school board meetings and the library board meetings, that they had a community conversation about post-COVID, how are the schools looking? How can we make them better? What's going on? Then angry people wouldn't be the only voices that the people who help control the library systems hear. And so if those are the only voices they hear, if they're coming back to COVID, they're having in-person meetings for the first time, terrified about that, and then they realize, or they're hearing that that librarians are grooming their children for who knows what, that is something that they're going to respond to, and they want to respond quickly. They're a public official, they're appointed or elected. So what they need is they need to hear from the rest of the community. If it's 8% of the people who think that these books should be ripped off the shelves, or even 12%, then that is not the majority. But if they don't hear from us, just like if the politicians in Washington and Sacramento don't hear from us, absent that, then they'll think they're doing fine, right? So it is important that they hear that, because if they don't hear that people think it's important for kids to be able to choose the books they want to choose, or for to leave the system in place, that the librarians who have been trained to do this stuff for a couple of 100 years here in the States, if they are not trusted servants, then of course you have to take a look at how you're going to govern the library. And if and I think that unanimous commissions are often not very healthy anyway. So if there are new voices that are coming in, that's one thing. But if you get suddenly 5 new voices who have an agenda, and they're not speaking for the rest of the voters, that's the problem. That's the problem. So, you all are here this morning to listen to stuff about this because you're passionate about it already. Think of the friends that you have that, they think that libraries may be nice to have, but they're not critical. Have a house party, talk to them. Talk to them about, what's your favorite library story? What did the library do to you? Or what was the first time that you read a book that you knew your parents didn't want you to read? Right? My mom did not want me to read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And I thought, I'm reading it. I'm just reading it. And so I remember going to the library and getting it and thinking, I wonder why she didn't. Oh, that's why she didn't want me to read. Yeah. Well, actually, San Francisco has is one of the first libraries to put social workers on staff, and I believe you have 3 now. I remember having the conversation when it was first begun, and there was the library itself really pays attention to the homeless community and tries to provide services and tries to make sure that they know where services can be provided that are not possibly appropriate in the library. The showers in the library, they're better showers down the road, but and so yes, I think sometimes we think in silos, and sometimes the library community thinks in silos, like the academics, the publics, the school libraries. But it's incredibly important that we bring the community together. I keep saying this. If we don't know what the problem is, how can we come up with a solution, as the gentleman said? But if we do know that it's mostly rhetoric, then it's our own fault if they win. It's really incredibly important that voices like ours are heard, and especially get your kids, get their friends, all of the generations, because the library is there for all generations. I remember in San Francisco, when I got here, when I got involved with the library, they had a new children's services director, and the library didn't have any money. They still, I think we hadn't passed the ballot measure. But very, very stealthily, she would add a teen librarian when she could. And she, says there were 2, and then there were 3, and then there were 4. And she changed the generation by making sure that branch libraries had teen librarians, and other libraries in California followed her efforts, and so on and so on. And I won't say that she inspired the entire nation, but it was certainly something that was happening elsewhere in the nation. And we have stats on some of the younger generations, and they use the library more than we do. I know it's a shock, but those are the people that we have to, the next generation and the generation after that, we have to make sure that their voices are actually heard in these conversations, because it's, it feels like it's rising. You hear the news from Louisiana and Texas and Florida, and some of that is just going to keep going. And partly that's because of the elections that are coming up. And, but together our voices can be incredibly powerful, because there are many more of us than there are of them. And, but honestly, if you do know funders, if you do know some of us have connections to foundations and things like that. If you know somebody who can write a check, the intellectual freedom department of the American Library Association has 3 people in it. 3 people who are trying to, 2 lawyers and an assistant. And they're trying to make sure that everybody is heard. They're trying to service all of these folks in America. And they're on the road all the time, or on Zoom calls all the time. You don't have to give a check to the American Library Association by any stretch of the imagination. Penn America is great, but libraries have been traditionally underfunded, and so their organizations are also pretty traditionally underfunded as well. Not that I'm trying to give you a commercial or anything like that, but it's important to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening, and it seems to me that, and I'm not saying anything brilliant, believe me, but it's not turned on.
And right in front of your face. That's, yeah, there you go.
I'm not saying anything brilliant, for sure, but it seems to me that as I'm listening to you more and more, is like the library associations in all their forms are a very concrete place where we can fight the culture wars all around. So I'm excited by this. The books are something I really care about deeply. In fact, my house is overloaded with them. there's culture wars. And the thing is about the culture wars, it's like it was over abortion before, right? Now abortion, the fire has been lit again. But we were talking, you know, in the 80s, there were culture wars, in the 90s, culture wars. This is a whole new culture war. And the library, as you're saying, is the place. Because often I'm a political person, but I do a lot of listening and thinking, but I don't do concrete action as much. So this is a place to do concrete action. I just wanted to say that. I hope my words have influenced a little bit. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm so glad you heard that, truly. Talk to your legislators, write to your legislators, write to the newspaper, get the word out, make sure, and read some of those books. Read some of the banned books, truly. Yeah, Joe.
Here.
I need the mic.
You do need the mic. Everybody needs the mic.
Oh, okay. Assuming that we were to join Freedom to Read, what types of things would they ask us to do? Was this an active organization? Are they going to send us newsletters?
They will send you newsletters, but they will also provide a toolkit for what you can do locally, which pretty much is make sure that your voice is heard, make sure that you have the house party, talk about a banned book. If you've got a banned book club, I'm making it up, but it actually wouldn't be so bad. The librarians, as I say, they're so passionate about this, but there's only so much they can do. And even the library associations, there's only so much they can do while they can provide the toolkits, and they can provide support for the libraries, and they can provide information for civilians, as I say. But the problem is that our voices, let me just back up. A guy who was the American Library Association executive director for a number of years, he used to say a librarian is worth its weight in gold, because they've got the data for you. They can walk into a legislator's offices and say, this is what we do, and this is what we do, and this is, you know, and they get 10 pages instead of maybe the one single sheet that you really need. But now they know how to do the single sheets. But a trustee is worth about 10 times that, because the trustee is a volunteer. A trustee is also a noted member of the community. A trustee can make connections that the librarian, even a library director, may not be able to do. And a civilian who just walks in and says, I want to talk to you about why I love libraries and why you really need to protect libraries, is worth 10 times a trustee too. Your voices are incredibly important. You're a voter, and they want to know what you hear. That's the thing. And the staff, you know, paying attention to the staff, because some of those staff members are going to be politicians in the next generation. Talk to them. Get them early. And we have in California, we have a lot of new legislators. If there is ever, you know, when we get a new senator, make sure that you write to that new senator and say, oh, one of the things that you have to have on your agenda is libraries, school, academic, public, all of the libraries, because they're incredibly important. Information for us is incredibly important. And thank them. Don't forget to thank them. And they're all home on recess now. So if there's something that you can go to that you think there's a politician going to attend, do it. They love that. They love talking to people. They love their voters. And so you can be the voters and they also love coming to libraries. If you got a branch library that you love, and you know one of the politicians, invite them, help ask the library too, of course. But you know, if they come to the library and they read a kid's book, they're safe. Nobody yells at them. They're doing a good thing. Somebody takes pictures. It's great. It's really great. Just be active. That's the thing.
Are there any last questions before we wrap up today?
And we have Zoom questions. Do we have Zoom questions?
We've been giving them to you.
Okay,
all
great.
along, yeah.
Great.
So,
No last questions? Did I make things even more complicated? Okay, so you all are going to do things, aren't you? You're going to
Yes.
talk to people. Excellent. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Deborah, for a wonderful presentation. I think we all know that we have things to do on this issue. I don't have kids in a library system, but I am active in Pen America. She mentioned that group. It's another one that you can, they're really doing good work. And Deborah is going to send me a sort of a set of slides and a toolkit that I'd like to send out to anyone who'd like to have those things. So if you'd like to receive those, you could send an email to humanrights@uusf.org and we'll respond to you with those things. I'd like to also mention that if you didn't sign in on the sign-in sheet back there, please do that so that we can inform you about programming like this that we are planning for the future. And we have more good sessions for you, including next Sunday, we're going to have the editor of 48 Hills. What's his name again? Tim Redmond, of course. Yes, I read his stuff all the time and it escaped me for a moment, but Tim Redmond will be here talking about the state of our city. So that should be a very fascinating and interesting discussion, for sure provocative. You know, Tim Redmond, you know, it will be that. 2 weeks after that, we have David Santos speaking on an anti-war topic, basically to bring us kind of up to date on a perspective on the war in Ukraine, things happening in China and so forth that are very frightening, I think, if we think about it much. So those are a couple of announcements. I just want to re-announce the lunch in this room at 12:30 today for the Ryman Award. Please come if you're able to. And I think that's all the announcements we have. So thank you so much. Thank you, Deborah, for this amazing presentation. And hope to see you all next Sunday. Thank you.